60 Minutes Rewind.
Labor Day weekend has always been considered the unofficial beginning of a presidential campaign. And while this one has been going on for a year and a half, both parties finalized their tickets this past week. With the kids going back to school and parents back to work, the nation is focused on what many people believe is one of the most important U.S. elections ever. Tonight we're covering the Democrats, who concluded an historic convention in Denver by making Senator Barack Obama of Illinois the first African-American ever nominated for president by a major party. We have the first joint interview with the candidate and his running mate, Senator Joe Biden of Delaware.
Hello, Democrats!
Senator Obama went into the Democratic convention locked in a dead heat with Republican rival John McCain and needed to do three things: introduce his running mate Joe Biden to the country, draw sharp distinctions between himself and his Republican opponent, and unify a Democratic Party badly split by a bruising primary campaign against Hillary Clinton. By most accounts, he accomplished all three.
I accept your nomination.
He attracted 84,000 people to Invesco Field in Denver and another 40 million to their television sets all across America.
And now is the time.
More Americans saw the speech than watched the opening ceremony of the Olympics. We began our conversations with the new Democratic candidates backstage.
How are you? So nice to see you.
Just moments after the most improbable nominee had given the most important speech of his young career.
Did you ever doubt it was going to happen?
Of course.
When?
Well, let's see. About a year ago, we were down 30 in Iowa. But I never doubted that it could happen. I never doubted that if we were able to mobilize the energy that you saw in that stadium all across the country.
I knew it was going to happen before he did. I was running like the devil. That's what I watched. I thought I was pretty good, but I watched. This guy just sort of grabbed the lightning, it just grabbed it. And you could tell, Barack, I tell you, my team knew. I knew in August.
We were doing okay. So, but this is exciting. So,
were you surprised to be up here?
I was surprised. I'm truly honored to be up here. I'm a great admirer. We're friends, and we fit.
Steve, good to see you.
By the time we continued the conversation with them the next day in Pittsburgh, the landscape had already changed.
Some of life's greatest opportunities come unexpectedly.
Senator McCain tried to steal the Democrats' thunder by announcing that Alaska's conservative first-term governor, 44-year-old Sarah Palin, would be his running mate, a move widely seen as an attempt to try and siphon disaffected supporters of Senator Clinton and blue-collar voters in battleground states where Obama has been the weakest. A few hours after the announcement, Senators Obama and Biden seemed as surprised as everyone else. What do you think of Senator McCain's vice presidential choice?
She seems to have a compelling life story. Obviously, she's a fine mother and a up-and-coming public servant. My sense is that she subscribes to John McCain's agenda.
Does the fact that he chose as his vice president someone who has less experience than you take that weapon out of his arsenal?
Well, I think that's a good question to address to Senator McCain. Of course, the issue of experience is going to be relevant. And if I were running against me, that's something that I would try to make an issue of as well, particularly if I had been in Washington as long as John McCain had.
She's a lifelong member of the NRA. She's a hunter. Her husband's a member of the United Steelworker Union, blue-collar guy, got a son on the way to Iraq. It seems like just the kind of person who would appeal the voters in states that you absolutely have to win.
Well, I think...
And they have to win.
Well, I am happy if this ends up being a referendum on what's going to be good for blue-collar workers. I'll put my guy, Joe Biden, up against anybody when it comes to fighting on behalf of those families, because he's been there. He comes out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. He's been fighting for those folks ever since he got into the Senate, and he hasn't stopped and he hasn't forgotten where he's come from.
I think we really underestimate the people in the neighborhood. The neighborhoods I came from, you came from. I really think we underestimate them. People get it. So I think they're looking for more than whether or not Joe Biden's from Scranton and she hunts.
I think there's, what you're going to do about it.
But you tried really hard to reach these people. You went and sipped beer, which I know you don't particularly like. I mean,
Steve, I had a beer last night. I mean, where do these stories come from, man?
I'm the one that doesn't drink.
Where does the story come from that I don't like beer?
Anyway,
come on, man.
You even tried bowling.
Now,
so
time out a second.
My question is, Senator...
I've got to defend my bowling honor here. It is true that my bowling score left something to be desired. The reason I bowled, though, wasn't to try to get votes. If I had been trying to get votes, I promise you I would have been avoiding a bowling alley. The reason I was there was to campaign, and we had great fun. But here's the bottom line. I wouldn't have been elected to the United States Senate out of Illinois, which is 12% African American, if I didn't have some broad appeal. So the mythology that's developed that somehow I can't get those votes is refuted by the very fact that I'm sitting in this chair.
Is that one of the reasons you picked Senator Biden?
What reason is that, Steve?
You said you've got Joe Biden working for you in Pennsylvania.
Well,
states like Pennsylvania.
Let me tell you the reason I picked Joe Biden. Number one, he can step in and become president, and I don't think anybody has any doubt about that. Number two is that if I'm in the room making the kinds of tough decisions that the next president's going to have to make, both on domestic policy and on international policy, then I want the counsel and advice of somebody who's not going to agree with me 100% of the time. In fact, somebody who's independent enough that can push back and give me different perspectives and make sure that I'm catching any blind spots that I have. And Joe Biden doesn't bite his tongue.
You've had some differences over pretty substantial issues. Iraq, for one.
Actually, we haven't. Look, Barack was right. He not only got it right about being against the war, I got it wrong about underestimating the incompetence of this administration when we gave the president the power we gave him at the time. He knew accurately that not even being outside, maybe it gave you better perspective, that meant he was going to war. Bush told me he wasn't going to war. I thought they meant it. You're standing outside. You knew they didn't mean it.
Well, one of the reasons that I love Joe, and one of the reasons I think he's going to be such an effective vice president, is he's blunt when he's right and he's blunt when he's wrong. And that means that I can trust his counsel. And that's what I think a president needs from a vice president. Look, there is no choice I could have made where the person's going to agree with me 100% of the time, and I wouldn't want that person. Michelle doesn't agree with me 100% of the time. In fact, with Michelle, if I can get to 50%, I'm feeling pretty good. What you want is somebody whose core values you believe in, who you trust, who you think is a straight shooter.
I mean, you have had, you from time to time put your foot in your mouth?
Sure I have.
I'm certain that Senator Obama was aware of that.
I'm confident. Everybody's aware of it.
Right. There was an issue in 1988 involving plagiarism, which I'm sure the Republicans are working on a campaign commercial now about.
I'm sure that's probably true.
What have you learned about politics and running for office in those 20 years?
I made a mistake. I made a mistake 21, 22 years ago. I was arrogant. I didn't think I had to prepare. I showed up at a debate and I failed to quote somebody, a guy named Neil Kinnock. And I just asked people and everyone else, look at the last 20 years of my career since that allegation occurred. But I think that I have a record that people can go back and examine and decide whether or not I mean what I say, whether, no matter how I say it, whether I'm consistent with what I've asserted I care about. That's all I care about. And, but, there's going to be a lot, I'm sure, a lot of things said about it.
I like who he is, and I think the American people will. And I think together we're going to win this election. Joe's going to end up being one of the finest vice presidents we've ever had.
The story will continue after this.
Have you spoken specifically about what your role would be in an Obama administration?
Yes. He had just a few questions that were important to him, but were threshold questions. If we didn't pass that threshold, he wasn't interested.
I don't want to go and just hang out. I could help Barack a lot more from chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee or from the United States Senate. But when he indicated to me he was looking for me to give me my best judgment and for him to consider it, that's good enough for me. I'm not looking for a portfolio. I'm not looking for anything other than to be able to be part of the change this guy's been talking about, and very bluntly, I've been talking about.
What's your role in the campaign? Can you make a difference in this race, and how do you do that?
The thing I can do is hopefully go into Scranton and Wilmington and Sacramento and other places and say, I know the guy. Politicians know quality when they see it in other politicians.
Did you mean that as a compliment?
As a compliment. Look, I tell you why.
Because he's spent most of this campaign trying to separate himself.
Well, let me tell you, he is separate. But here's the bottom line. The thing about him that everybody misunderstands, and this is, boss, here we go. We may have our first difference here. But all kidding aside, here's the deal. Everybody knows the way he's caught on to this yearning in the American public. But the second piece of that is, it's not only the idealism, you gotta be tough. You gotta be tough to be the President of the United States of America. And if you don't have political good sense, if you're not politically tough, let me tell you something, I don't want you to be my president.
And you think he is?
Absolutely.
But one of the weaknesses in terms of this campaign is that there are people out there who don't think that you have a punch, that you are not that killer instinct. Yeah. That you are a very deliberative, judicious person who prides himself on building consensus, but it is not in your DNA to be confrontational.
The fact that I don't go out of my way to call people names or try to take cheap shots, and that I try not to throw the first punch, but to see if I can find a way to work together with people, sometimes leads people to underestimate what I've got. I think it's fair to say that if I couldn't not only take a punch but occasionally throw one, I wouldn't be sitting here.
You just come through a very historic week. I mean, politically, this is a real milestone in American history. But yet, there was almost no mention made of it. You made no mention of it, and the Democratic Party made almost no mention of it. Why is that? I mean, you're the first black person ever to be nominated by a major party.
Yeah, I think people noticed that.
You didn't think you needed to bring to their attention?
I think people understood the significance of it.
Is part of it the fact that you don't want to be considered as a black candidate?
Well, look, it is absolutely true that I want to be the president for all America. This is not a symbolic exercise on my part. I intend to win this race so that I can work on behalf of all families in America. If I can get health care for every American, if I can make sure that the economy is providing jobs that pay a decent wage, if I can solve this energy problem so that we're more secure, if I can make an education system work for every child, then that's going to be good for black Americans, that's going to be good for Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, white Americans. That's going to be good for everybody.
One last question. You are running against the record of an administration that is one of the most unpopular in the history of the country.
Good reason.
And there are people that believe that you should be much farther ahead in the polls than you are.
Yeah.
What do you say to that, and are you comfortable with the way this race is going and where you are right now?
Look, this is going to be a rough, tough battle. The Republicans don't govern very well, but they know how to campaign. And what I would expect is that it's going to take mid-October before a whole lot of people start making up their minds. And there's nothing wrong with that. This notion that somehow this should be a cakewalk and I should just walk into the election with a 10, 15-point lead, I think doesn't give the American people enough credit. They want to get this thing right.